So coming up this weekend is going to be UFC Fight Night Sandhagen versus Figueiredo, and this is going to be a card taking place in front of a crowd. You guys know that I love seeing cards in front of a crowd. I very much strongly prefer them over the abandoned warehouse events, and I think that this one's going to be a pretty solid one, I'll be honest. I think top to bottom, there are some fun fights. There's also a couple of fights which I think could maybe not be the best for in front of a crowd, but I think overall it should be a pretty solid card. I also do think as well that we did just see a pretty good card take place in front of a crowd with Prates versus Gary, of course, in that main event, which Gary looked really good, and I know he nearly got finished at the end of the 5th round. He gassed out a bit, but in front of that, he looked fantastic. I thought he looked really, really good. I don't think you can justify giving him the title shot like he seems to want after just one win against Prates, but I do think that the performance was good enough to the point where if Gary goes out there and wins another one against a top contender and Shavkat Rakhmonov has already got his title shot, then I think you could give it to Gary. But aside from that, I do think that Shavkat is still next in line after JDM, of course. As for the co-main event, Anthony Smith did retire. He did unfortunately retire in the position that he is very well known for, which is just him on his knees getting finished off by ground and pound. But as for Smith, he did end on a somewhat good career. You know, he did have that fight against Jones that went the distance, and he fought in the UFC a bunch of times in 2 different divisions. But the matchmaking was ruthless, man. I mean, I really don't know if I could think of a worse opponent to give Zhang Mingyang. I did think that there was potential for it to be a trap line. I made that very clear because we've never seen Zhang grapple. We still haven't seen him grapple, even though, of course, Anthony Smith was trying to take him down. But Smith just spent the whole fight, like, moving forward with his hand up in the air. Like, of course Zhang was going to knock him out, but, I mean, I bet on Zhang KO on round 1 at plus 115. The odds, of course, weren't really worth it, but it cashed, so we will take it and move on. Speaking of bets, you can check out Angelo and Jacob's bets on the We Want Picks premium membership website, and of course, my fellow Kiwi Bet Sam is now on there as well with his premium bets. It is $10 per month if you sign up, but if you do sign up, you do help me a lot. I get a pretty good commission out of it if you do sign using my code, which of course Angelo has probably already told you all about what's on that website, but there's bets on there. There's also tools to help you make your own bets, and also my articles for the PFL and other promotions, which will be coming out pretty soon. I actually have an exam tomorrow at the time of me recording and uploading this video, so I'll have to write the article after that exam, because right now I'm just trying to study to hopefully get a good grade on that exam, because it's the first of 4 over the next couple of weeks. Unfortunately for me, studying structural engineering, it's not that easy, I'll be honest. I wish it was a bit easier, but that's life, man, and someone's got to know how strong that dirt is, I guess. So let's get into the card, though. That first fight of the night is Julianna Miller versus Ivana Petrovic. I will admit to you guys, I don't think this is the best fight. I don't think you really need me to tell you that, but Julianna Miller, she's kind of like a failed experiment, I guess you could say, in the UFC. She came into the Ultimate Fighter with very little to no experience, really, whatsoever, and then did manage to win the Ultimate Fighter, but then since then it has kind of looked like she may not be quite UFC level. In hindsight, her performance against Veronica Hardy wasn't all that bad, but against Luana Santos, her striking did very much get exposed. And that is, I think, the problem with Julianna Miller. I think that she just doesn't really have very good striking at all. In fact, it's actually pretty hard to watch at times. Miller is mostly a grappler. Her grappling is pretty good. I mean, it is what got her to the UFC in the first place. And she is taking on another fighter that can grapple pretty well, Ivana Petrovic. The things that Ivana Petrovic has struggled in the past, though, is actually against bigger opponents that can outgrapple her. And I don't think Julianna Miller is that. I don't think that Miller can present as much of a threat on the ground as to who Petrovic has lost to in the past. And I don't think that Miller's going to have a size advantage in this matchup. So I think Petrovic, just kind of based on previous fights, should be the slightly better striker. She's not a great striker herself, but as long as the fight's on the feet, I think Petrovic is going to be the one winning the minutes. I'm going to pick her to win by decision. Don'Tale Mayes fights against Thomas Petersen. I'll admit to you guys, this is a close fight. This is a closer fight than minus 240. It really is. Thomas Petersen, of course, recently did fight against Shamil Gaziev. He got knocked out against Shamil Gaziev, and before that, he just hasn't really looked fantastic in the UFC. The thing about Thomas Petersen is he is a wrestler, but he just has no striking. like, at all. The striking defense, I actually will give him some credit in the fact that it's not that bad, as in, like, he does have some head movement, a lot more than some other wrestling heavyweights, but aside from that, he just doesn't really have much to offer. In fact, he's got nothing to offer on the feet, I'll be honest. He just kind of moves forward, he can throw punches, and he's going to try and get that takedown. And Don'Tale Mayes is a pretty tough guy to deal with if you don't really know how to strike, because, of course, Don'Tale Mayes is actually, very surprisingly, a pretty dynamic striker for heavyweight. This guy does throw spinning attacks, he throws spinning wheel kicks on occasion, but in my opinion, he's just trying to do too much. You know, I think that Don'Tale Mayes just kind of stuck to the very basics of kickboxing with the 1-2, the hooks, of course, with the boxing, and then just, instead of throwing spinning wheel attacks, and just kick to the legs, kick to the body, I think you'd be a lot better off. But that's what Don'Tale Mayes likes to do. The takedown defense is okay, but I don't think it's amazing, and I don't think that Mayes is just going to go out there and just one-shot knock out Thomas Petersen. So I am going to pick Petersen to win this matchup, but I will be honest, if you're betting on this fight, yeah, if you're betting on this fight, I don't think I can help you, I'll be honest. Petersen is minus 250. That's too wide anyway, but yeah, I think Petersen wins. But this is low-level heavyweights, man, it really is. You know, Gaston Bolanos takes on Quang Le, and I will be honest, going into the UFC, I was high on Quang Le. Quang Le come into the UFC against Chris Gutierrez on very short notice, and I actually sat here and said, I think that Quang Le should be like minus 150 coming in there against Chris Gutierrez, and he closed, I believe, plus 300. So I think Chris Gutierrez should be minus 150 against Quang Le, and it closed with Chris Gutierrez being a minus 400 favorite. And I'll tell you, Quang Le put up a performance which justified that minus 150 price tag. I'll be honest, Quang Le made it very competitive with Chris Gutierrez, but then he just went out there against Xiaolong, and he lost against a grappler at what he is best at. Xiaolong, despite his UFC performance against Quang Le, is not a striker. He is not a guy that likes to stand and bang. He is a BJJ guy. He is a grappler. And he just went out there against Quang Le, and although the fight was fun, just stood his ground, stood his base, and stood and banged with Quang Le until he knocked him out. And I think that's actually kind of not good to see, because we just saw Quang Le lose in what he's good at against someone that's nowhere near as good at striking as Gaston Bolanos is. Now, Gaston Bolanos, very, very one-dimensional fighter. This guy truly is only a striker, but he does have a very good kickboxing background behind him. He does have a very big highlight reel when he was fighting for Bellator, and so far in the UFC, he's looked pretty good. Now, he did make his debut against the GOAT, the King, Aaron Phillips, who I think went 0-3, 0-4 in the UFC and had some time off before this matchup, so that was something. But then he did just go out there against Cortavius Ramios, and he looked pretty good. Bolanos is a very talented striker, a very good kickboxer. He's known for his spinning attacks. He's known for his spinning elbow. And I think against Quang Le, he's going to be able to land those strikes, man. Le is just a very explosive striker. There's not really too much more to his game, in my opinion. Even when you do watch his regional fights, you know, like some of them are pretty close until he gets into the second round and knocks out his opponent and kind of stuff like that. Le relies on his explosiveness, but Bolanos, honestly, is probably just going to do what Ngari was doing to Prates and just move around, and Le's never going to be able to land anything. So I'm going to go with Gaston Bolanos to knock out Quang Le in this matchup here. I know I picked Bolanos by KO against Ramios, and he never got it done, but I think that he can get it done here against Quang Le. We just saw Le get knocked out by, in my opinion, a worse striker, and I think that Bolanos can go out there and get it done in front of a crowd. And now, Marina Rodriguez is taking on Gillian Robertson. I will be honest, this is a pretty sad fall from grace, because at one point, I did genuinely believe that we could see Marina Rodriguez get a title shot, and if not get a title shot, potentially become the champion. And she didn't get it. You know, I think that this stoppage against Amanda Lemos was way too early. I mean, she literally stumbled Rodriguez, and then the ref just stopped the fight. It was a very, very odd situation. Then kind of ever since then, it's gone a little bit downhill for Marina Rodriguez. Rodriguez is, and especially at one point was, a very talented, rangy striker for this weight class at 115 pounds, but now she takes on Gillian Robertson, and that size advantage that she does typically have, she's not going to have it anymore. Gillian Robertson has now come down to 115 pounds from 125, and she's looked really good. She's now no longer a small flyweight. She's now a big strawweight. And that's super important given what Gillian Robertson is good at, and that is grappling. She's got very good submission abilities. Of course, she made her strawweight debut against the undefeated Piera Rodriguez. Ended up losing to Richie, but since then has gone on a pretty good streak. And I think that now that she takes on Marina Rodriguez, she's taken on someone that, in my opinion, is nowhere near as good as grappling as what Gillian Robertson is. And I think if the fight can get down to the ground, Robertson can look quite good. Now, it is worth noting that Gillian Robertson's striking it's improving, but it is going to be levels behind Marina Rodriguez at this point in her career. But the thing about Robertson is you can tell that her striking's getting better. It's just not getting better really fast, which you can't really expect from someone that is just so good at grappling. I do think that Gillian Robertson goes out there, and I think that she can take down Marina Rodriguez, and I think that she can get the submission in this matchup. So I do like Robertson to go out there and get it done with a submission victory over Rodriguez. Somewhat sad to see, as at one point it was very high on Rodriguez. I do think that she probably could have and should have got the title shot instead of having to fight Amanda Lemos, but it is what it is. That was the state of the division at the time, I guess. Azamat Bekoev now fights against Ryan Loder, and now I am more than aware that I picked Zach Reese to knock out Azamat Bekoev. I'm more than aware of saying that, and now it's going to sound like I'm trying to save myself again by saying this. But although I'm picking Azamat Bekoev, you need to look at this matchup in a similar lens to the way that Bekoev fought against a similar fighter in Dylan Budka. Dylan Budka, we all are very familiar with Budka and what he brings to his table, which is unfortunately not a lot, which is why he's been cut from the UFC. But Dylan Budka is a wrestler, and he didn't really have anything on the feet at all, but he could wrestle pretty well. Now Bekoev is going to be taking on someone that is also a wrestler, that doesn't have too much to offer on the feet, and can also wrestle pretty well. But the difference between Budka and Loder is a much, much bigger fighter than Dylan Budka. When Dylan Budka signed to the UFC of the Contender Series, Dana White thought that he could make 170 pounds. That's a 15-pound difference in weight class that Dana White tried to make him do. Ryan Loder's 6'2", 76-inch reach, and a pretty solid wrestler himself. Now, the thing is about Ryan Loder is we did just see him get a very dominant win over Valentin in the wrestling department in the Ultimate Fighter finale, and Bekoev stepped up on short notice against Zach Reese. And yes, as I did say in the intro of this individual breakdown, I genuinely did pick Zach Reese to knock out Azamat Bekoev. And my opinion on that fight is yes, Bekoev was going to knock him out, but the referee is who put Zach Reese unconscious in that matchup. But it was a very, very good win for Bekoev in that situation. Bekoev is a striker that does wrestle on occasion, but it's not like he needs to wrestle. And I think in this matchup, he is going to have the striking advantage, which is going to be quite important for him. And once he does establish top control, he is very dominant with it. I do think that as long as the fighter's on the feet, I think that I do give the striking advantage to Bekoev. But I do just want you guys to know, it wasn't that long ago, really, that Bekoev had a very close fight against Dylan Budka, which some people do argue Budka won this fight as well. This was a 5-round fight, though, of course, but still, styles do make fights, and this is a very similar stylistic matchup to a kind of fight that Bekoev has struggled with in the past. But I'm going to pick Bekoev to win this matchup. I'm going to pick him to win by decision over Ryan Loder, the Ultimate Fighter champion. Now we can move up to Yana Santos fighting against Miesha Tate. I don't know if this is confirmed or not. Can someone tell me in the comments, is this confirmed to be Miesha Tate's retirement fight? Because I feel like it's got to be, right? Like, I mean, at this point, Miesha Tate's nearly 39 years old. She's come out of retirement before. She came out of retirement somewhat recently and fought the 46-year-old Marion Renault, 44-year-old Marion. Like, and that's her most recent win aside from Julia Avila. And Julia Avila, I'm not even kidding, fought for the first time since 2021 in that matchup, and then took another 2 years. Like what are we doing here? At this point, you know, she lost to Lauren Murphy. She got out-wrestled by Lauren Murphy in 2022. It's got to be Tate's retirement. I mean, how much more damage can you do to your own legacy? I don't really know, but I think that Yana Santos does win this matchup. I'm picking Yana Santos as the underdog. Santos, of course, is a fighter that has struggled with making 135 pounds in the past. And the thing about Santos is she's okay at everything, you know, she does strike relatively well. Most of her strikes are just straight up the middle, though. They're just straight punches, straight kicks to the body. And the main thing for me in this fight is honestly, as my lighting just disappears, the sun has gone. The main thing for me in this matchup is we just saw Miesha Tate not that long ago get beaten in what she's best at by Lauren Murphy. I think that Yana Santos in this matchup can defend the takedowns that are definitely going to come. And I think that Yana Santos in this matchup can outstrike Miesha Tate, a 39-year-old Miesha Tate. Santos was on a losing streak, but a lot of these fights were against pretty good opponents, and you could argue that she beat Carol Rosa, even though Rosa actually has now gone on to like win a couple of pretty decent fights. But I'm picking Santos. Santos is the underdog in this matchup. I understand that this wasn't really the best breakdown of the fight, but my main points that I wanted to get across in this fight is that Santos, we've seen her be more active recently, and I think Santos as well could potentially be the bigger fighter in the octagon, which could make all the difference, considering, once again, Miesha Tate got out-wrestled by Lauren Murphy. Let's move on. Jeremy Stephens is now back in the UFC after a pretty bad run in the PFL, I'll be honest. I'm going to have to take a minute to look through this here, because Jeremy Stephens now, I mean, he's a pretty fun fighter. He's fought for the UFC 33 times. And he did go on, I believe, I could be incorrect about this, but I think it was like the second longest losing streak in UFC history. And then he moved up to 155 against Gamrot on short notice, I will say, but, you know, that's a tough matchup to take. And I thought he looked really bad in the PFL. I'll be honest, he got boxed up, beaten at his own game by Clay Collard, who's way past his prime now. But I mean, 2022, I guess that was kind of good. Clay Collard, close fight against Miles Price. If you guys don't know who Miles Price is, I don't really know what to really describe his style, but like you just should not be having close fights with Miles Price. Anthony Pettis finished him in the first round in 2022. I don't really know what else to say. He just looked really bad in the PFL. And Mason Jones has looked really, really good in Cage Warriors. Now, if you guys don't know the situation with Mason Jones, he didn't actually get cut from the UFC. I think a lot of people are probably going to claim that he did and say that he did. That's actually not true. He was offered another contract with the UFC, but he actually turned it down to go back to Cage Warriors and sorry, what happened was he left the UFC by not re-signing the contract because he didn't believe that he was at the level he wanted to be to make it into the top 15. He didn't want to be a guy that was just going to win one and then lose one, and then win one and lose one. So, you know, he did a bit of stat padding in Cage Warriors. Let's be honest, with some of the matchups that he took on. But he looked really, really good. You know, this fight against Michael Pagani was an absolute war. It was super, super fun. And aside from that, he was just kind of beating the absolute piss out of guys that were nowhere near as good as him. Let's be honest. But yeah, Mason Jones recently in his career, I think the striking has gone up a level. The kicks have really gone up a level. I think this is just kind of one of those fights where I think the UFC can maybe see Mason Jones as a potential star out of a country which, to my knowledge, right now doesn't really have like a big representative. I can't really think of a fighter from Wales right now in the UFC making big weight. I don't even think I could think of a fighter from Wales right now in general, actually, when I think about it. But yeah, I think that Mason Jones, they see Mason Jones as someone they can use Jeremy Stephens to build his name, and Stephens just won a bunch of BKFC fights. I guess that's good enough to get back into the promotion. But yeah, I think Jones, like genuinely, the breakdown of Jones' recent fights is that he's improved his kickboxing so much, man. He looks so good on the feet. The leg kicks are money, the body kicks are money, the fighting from range is money. I think this is just kind of a situation where Mason Jones is going to fight against a boxer and Stephens, and he's going to be able to fight from range, and I think he's going to pick his shots, and I think eventually he's going to knock out Jeremy Stephens in this fight. Now we can move up to Cameron Smotherman taking on Serhiy Sidey, and this is an interesting one for me, I will be honest, because I think that this fight comes down to whether or not Serhiy Sidey wants to wrestle in this fight, because of course we all know that Smotherman just beat the PFL $1 million bantamweight tournament champion Jake Hadley on short notice, and I'm not kidding. The way that bracket just went, Jake Hadley's going to win $1 million because the guys that would have presented the biggest test to Hadley lost. So yeah, Smotherman just beat the PFL $1 million champion on short notice. And the thing about Smotherman is I like Smotherman. I've been calling for Smotherman to get signed to the promotion for a while. I know he got knocked out on the Contender Series to Jaralan Piscagoria, which is not going to be a good look in anyone's eyes. I am more than aware of how bad that is. But he's so funny, man. Like, Smotherman really reminds me of Nate Diaz. You know, some of his post-fight interviews where he's like, I think it's this matchup against Adam Martinez. Like, or no, it was this fight against Peter Caballero. His interview, man, I was cracking up laughing watching that after that fight, man. Like, he was like calling the crowd to like give him tacos and stuff. It was funny. Like, he's got a good personality. I like him a lot, and I've been calling for him to be in the promotion for a long time. But he's very, very small, 135 pounds, and now he's taking on someone that's very big for 135 pounds. So he said he's a 5'11", 5'11" bantamweight, and he's a pretty talented grappler. Here's the problem with Sidey though. We need to do an IQ test on this man because he's not grappling. He's really testing me. I'll be honest with you, man. He knocked out Ramon Taveras in a fight which they had to rematch, and then he lost to Taveras in a fight I thought he won, I'll be honest. But the fine IQ, man, on display in this matchup, just where was it? Because there was none. And against Smotherman, the way that you beat Cameron Smotherman is you out-wrestle Smotherman. Smotherman's a very good boxer, but he's very small for 135. He's kind of like the Josh Van of 135 pounds, where he's very small, but he's very talented. The way that you can beat Smotherman is by wrestling him, and Sidey is a good grappler. He's got an awkward Muay Thai style, which I used to use to justify his striking not being that good. He's got a Muay Thai style that doesn't really work. He needs to grapple to win fights, and he's chosen not to grapple in fights. However, I will say this, he did just barely edge out a win over Garrett Armfield, and this is a similar fight to the Smotherman fight, given the fact that Armfield and Smotherman are very good boxers, and I think it just kind of comes down to, can Sidey just kind of make the adjustments from that Armfield fight, utilize, in my opinion, what should be just a bit more grappling, a little bit more pressure would be quite important, and I think that he can. So I'm going to pick Sidey to win this fight by decision, even though I do really like Cameron Smotherman, and I'm very happy that he is in the UFC. And now Montel Jackson is going to be taking on Daniel Marcos. I've said it for a very, very long time, and I've never done it. I've never done it yet. Daniel Marcos has always been a future fade for me. And you understand how much it pains me that the time that I have waited, all this time, I've waited so long to fade this man. Since the Contender Series. I've waited so long. So long. And here it is. And he's minus 200. Like, come on, man. I've been trying to fade Daniel Marcos as a big dog. I've picked Marcos to win. To my understanding, I believe every single fight in his UFC career, I did pick him to beat Adrian Yanez. But I did pick Brandon Lewis, if you can believe it, to beat him in 2022. But I think since then, I've always been picking Marcos, but waiting for that opportunity to jump on the potential to fade him. And that time has come. But Montel Jackson's minus 200. How about that? How about that? I think Montel Jackson goes out there. I think he knocks out Daniel Marcos. He just knocked out Damon Blackshear. I mean, by just, I mean, like 9 months ago. 18 seconds, I believe it was. Just an insane KO over a very talented fighter who's now gone on a win streak since then. Against pretty good guys. You know, Archie Long, 5-2 in the UFC before fighting Damon Blackshear. And Cody Gibson is a giant for the weight class. And speaking of giants for the weight class, Jackson's a very big guy at 135 pounds. He doesn't fight often, but I tell you, this guy's got a good skill set. He's got a lot of power at 135. You know, there's not that many people that just have one punch KO power at this weight class like Montel Jackson does have. And another thing about Montel Jackson as well is he's got very solid wrestling. If he wants to offensively wrestle in this matchup against Marcos, I believe he can do it. So I think that in this matchup, although Jackson might not have as many tools as Marcos does on the feet, because Marcos is a very good striker that does have the kickboxing, he's got the knees, he's got the elbows, I don't think he's going to have the same level of wrestling that Jackson has. So if Jackson kind of comes into this matchup with a pretty smart game plan, with the idea of using that power, that boxing that he's got, to set up takedowns against Marcos, I think this could be a very good fight for Jackson. I think that Jackson could look amazing against a 17-0 opponent, and a legitimate 17-0 opponent at this point. Marcos is really kind of showing himself to be a top guy, but I think that we can see Jackson get it done. Jackson's just a talent, man. He really is. I do strongly believe in him, and I do believe if he fought more often, this guy would already be in the rankings. Like, I just don't understand why he's been taking so much time off throughout these fights. But, you know, like, JP Buys, like, I know he didn't finish JP Buys, but if you watch that fight, man, I think that's the most knockdowns in UFC history. Poor JP Buys. A moment of silence for JP Buys as I wrap this one up, man. But yeah, I think Jackson knocks him out in the second or third round. Santiago Ponzinibbio against Daniel Rodriguez. Okay, two guys that are definitely on the second half of their career at this point. You guys do know that I love myself a bit of the Argentine dagger. Not in the way that you are thinking, in the form of Santiago Ponzinibbio's striking ability. Oh my god, I dug myself a hole in that one. But, yeah, I picked Santiago Ponzinibbio to beat Carlston Harris in his last fight, and I think he was the favourite in that matchup, but I remember the odds being somewhat close. And I'll be honest, I don't think he looked that good in that fight. Harris is not a very talented striker. I like Harris as well. You know, I followed Harris. I even watched Harris fight against Asagid Izagakmaev live. I watched this fight live. Where is it? When he managed to do it before he got in the UFC. This one here. But man, he's just not a talented striker. And Ponzinibbio is a striker, and he made it close in the striking against Harris. I didn't like seeing that at all. And Daniel Rodriguez, you know, he's kind of gone up and down throughout his career. Really down when he did lose to Ian Gary. I will say he took that fight on short notice, got knocked out in the first round, and then since then just kind of hasn't looked amazing. But D-Rod's still D-Rod, you know what I mean? He's still got the ability to do what he does. And what he does is he boxes, and on occasion he'll look for a clinch and maybe a takedown. And I will admit, he has really slowed down in the last few fights. I know he did go on a losing streak, and he was on a big win streak before that losing streak. I still think that he's got a little bit more left in the tank than Santiago Ponzinibbio, because it does come down to, you go way back to Ponzinibbio, he was a prospect. This guy was 26-4 at one point in his career. He had the blood disease. I mean, if you've seen the photos, it looks really horrifying and really difficult. And he comes back, and they gave him Li Jingliang, not Mikhail Pereira. They gave him Li Jingliang in his comeback fight. Man, like the UFC, that wasn't nice. But yeah, I think D-Rod can get it done here. You know, he's going to be the bigger guy in the matchup too. He's absolutely huge for 170 pounds. I also thought as well, where is it? It's not this fight. Never mind. I thought D-Rod has looked pretty good. Yeah, it was the Neil Magny fight. I thought D-Rod was looking good until he got subbed by Magny. And I know Magny's Magny and people like to make fun of him, but Magny's a much better fighter than I think people give him credit for. So I'll give him the credit. I like D-Rod in this matchup. It looks like the public is not on D-Rod, but D-Rod is the favorite in the fight. And now we've got, you know, this is the fight that I think people are going to be talking about for a long time. In the build-up, that is. I thought that it was going to be Wellmaker versus Simon. Remember when I was saying that that was like the People's Prelim, main event prelim, that everyone was going to disagree on? And I thought that Simon versus Wellmaker was going to be there. And I think there was a little bit of that in the end, of course, but there wasn't that much discussion about it. I think there's going to be a lot of discussion about this. Because this has the potential to either be like a really bad fight, or one of the best wins of Reinier de Ridder's career. And that's kind of crazy to say, because Reinier de Ridder has been a champion for one championship in MMA, of course, in 2 different weight classes. He did fight the same guy to do that in Ung Lat Sung, but I will not tolerate any Ung Lat Sung disrespect. This guy has statues made out of this guy in Myanmar. Pretty sick. But yeah, Reinier de Ridder, he really took advantage of a champion that did have a very big hole in his game, which was the grappling, and that is how he became the champion there. And now he's coming to the UFC, and he's looked pretty good. I'll be honest, he just beat Kevin Holland. Who picked Kevin Holland to beat RDR? This idiot. I did it. That wasn't a good pick, was it? It was a really bad pick. I just didn't think that Holland was that bad. That's kind of what it comes down to. That's my excuse in that one, I'll be honest. But, you know, before that, he went to war with GM3 on the feet, and that's the fight I'm going to be looking at, because we just saw Bonacall, of course, fight a very similar matchup against the one and only Paul Craig. And yes, that fight sucked. Yes, it was one of the worst fights of the year. Yes, I think that this fight is going to be nearly the exact same. Bonacle refused to take down Paul Craig, and for some reason, Paul Craig refused to even try to take down Bonacle. I don't know if Paul Craig just thought that he just didn't know. Maybe Paul Craig just didn't believe that it was possible for him to take down Bonacle, but he just never even really tried, and he just accepted defeat in a very low volume striking matchup against Bo, and Bo ended up winning that fight. I mean, some people thought Paul Craig won the fight, by the way. That's how bad this fight was when it come down to the striking. But the thing about Bo is his striking's looked good in the past. He did knock down Donovan Beard on his second Contender Series run, and I know that is Donovan Beard, but Beard is a good fighter. Beard is before the recent run was on a pretty good win streak to beat Miles Lee, who's a good prospect, but he knocked down Donovan Beard in that fight, and he knocked out Val Woodburn in that fight. Yeah, no, I'm grasping at straws. Just got to give me something here to justify it, right? I think that Bonacle's the better striker out of the two. RDR striking against a good friend, the legendary Gerald Miesha. It was bad, man. It was really bad. And I think that Bonacle's striking, although it's not pretty to watch, he's going to be more aggressive in there. He's going to throw more punches, which I think is more important here, because if he throws kicks, RDR could try to take him down or roll for a leg or something odd and awkward like that. Then for RDR, if RDR gives Bonacle the opportunity, I could see Bonacle trying to take him down too. But I think it's a striking fight. I think it's a 15-minute striking fight, and I think it's a very boring one at that. And I think it's the exact same fight and matchup as the Paul Craig fight was. So I'm going to pick Bonacle in this one here as a massive favorite, minus 260, to defeat Reinier Deruda. Is it going to be shades of Kevin Holland again? I don't think so, because I don't think that Bo is going to struggle with grappling anywhere near as much as Holland did. But I will admit, I didn't think RDR was going to beat Kevin Holland. I was pretty confident Holland was going to knock his ass out. So we'll see how he goes in this one. And now we've got Cory Sandhagen fighting against Deiveson Figueiredo. Deiveson Figueiredo, I genuinely believe, if you base this on a previous champions in different weight classes, arguably should have gotten a title shot with the run that he went on. Now, I know that people were going to call me crazy, but you got to hear me out. This guy saved flyweight. He is the savior of this weight class. They were going to cut 125 pounds until Deiveson Figueiredo come along and started getting big finishes and really kind of just made the division great again. Was robbed, in my opinion, pretty badly, very badly, against Moreno in this matchup here, which ended up them fighting 4 times, which is just crazy, but it's what it is. And then he come up to the UFC, moved up a weight class, and he didn't get a title shot even after winning 3 ranked fights in a row. I mean, I know Cody Garbrandt wasn't ranked, but you guys know what I mean. And he was a former champion in a different weight class. I feel like if this was someone what's a good example that I can think of right now? Israel Adesanya, he was the champion for a bit. Obviously Adesanya had more defenses, but Adesanya become the champion. He just lost a few fights. I think if Adesanya moved up to 205 pounds and won 3 fights in a row in the rankings, he would get a title shot. You know what I mean? And Figueiredo didn't. And I think that he's going to lose to Sandhagen now, which is pretty sad. We just saw him lose to Yana. I think we're going to see him lose to Sandhagen. Sandhagen, I will admit, he really did disappoint me in his fight against Umar Nurmagomedov. I did pick Cory Sandhagen to win that fight. I thought that Umar Nurmagomedov was going to fight his toughest fight, the toughest stylistic matchup that he possibly could in Cory Sandhagen. I looked at the bantamweight division, and I looked for Umar Nurmagomedov's toughest stylistic matchup. And the conclusion that I come to, if you can believe it, I know hindsight's 2020, but I had my reasons at the time, was Cory Sandhagen. And then because Umar beat Cory Sandhagen, I'm pretty confident I picked Umar to beat Murav. But you guys know what I mean. In fact, I did. I know I did, actually. But the reason why I picked Cory Sandhagen to beat Umar is honestly pretty similar to the reason to why I'm going to pick him to beat Deiveson Figueiredo. And that's because Sandhagen's been working on his wrestling recently, man. Sandhagen is one of the best strikers at 135 pounds. In fact, I think you could even make the argument that he's one of the better strikers in the UFC in general. His fight against Petr Yan is a fight of the year. Now, it's not a fight that is non-stop action for 25 minutes. It's just a really, really high-level striking matchup between two very good strikers, two of the better strikers that are in the promotion, and I'll put my hand up and say that. And the thing about Sandhagen is, since that loss to Yana in a purely striking matchup, he instantly just started to wrestle. You know, against Song Yadong, he was wrestling quite a lot, actually, surprising amount. And he started wrestling a lot against Chito Vera. He won the majority of that fight with control time. I know that there was a judge that scored it to Chito, but that is one of the worst scorecards in UFC history. That was a 50-45 Cory Sandhagen in that matchup. But and then since then he obviously fought Rob Font, but Sandhagen has been working on his wrestling and he's been working on his striking. I think that's what's going to be the key to defeating Deiveson Figueiredo in this fight, because Figgy, he's a very talented guy. He's a well-rounded guy. He can grapple very well. He can wrestle very well, and he can strike very well. But what he's implemented well into the 135-pound division recently, or in my opinion, from what it has seemed to be, is the wrestling. I think that Figgy's wrestling has actually translated very well to the weight class, and I think that you can actually owe the Cody Garbrandt fight a lot of credit when it comes down to that, because in that matchup, let's be honest, at UFC 300, of course, Cody Garbrandt was looking incredible on the feet against Figgy. But at the end of the day, it was Figueiredo's ability to go out there and out-wrestle Cody Garbrandt and out-grapple Cody Garbrandt. And I know that people do discredit Cody Garbrandt a lot now because he has been on a pretty bad run, let's be honest. But Garbrandt has never been known for bad takedown defense or bad grappling defense, you know. Figueiredo was able to get past that. And I don't think that he's going to be able to get past Cory Sandhagen's grappling. You know, Sandhagen's got the good takedown defense. He defended some takedowns against Umar, but in my opinion, what really let him down was that in the moments on the feet, Cory lost those moments against Umar, which was surprising to me. But I think this is kind of one of those fights where you just come off a loss, like you come off a loss to Petr Yan. The mistakes that he made in the Umar fight, in my opinion, was just like no urgency really at all. And I think that he's going to come out there with a much more urgent sort of attitude in this fight, I guess. A much more urgent game plan. I think he's going to throw more volume. I think he's going to potentially shoot more takedowns. I think he's just going to be a more active fighter. I know it's a 25-minute fight, and cardio is not unlimited. We just learnt that against Ngary. Of course, when Ngary gassed out in the 4th round against Carlos Prates. But I think that Cory Sandhagen can maintain a pretty solid pace for the first 3 rounds. I mean, we saw him maintain a wrestling pace against Chito for the first 3 rounds, and then he just decided to strike with them after that. I think Cory Sandhagen wins. I don't see like an obvious path for Figgy to win. I will be honest. I know that sounds disrespectful to Figgy because I do respect him quite a lot. But for Figgy to beat Sandhagen, I think that it would actually take Figueiredo to really kind of establish something on the feet. And I just don't think that Figgy's going to be able to get that going, I'll be honest. I'd like Sandhagen quite a lot in this matchup to get it done. He's minus 450. Once again, disrespectful to Figgy, I'll be honest. But at the same time, like, I do genuinely believe that Sandhagen gets this done. I think he looks good doing it. So, gotta pick Sandhagen to win this matchup by decision against Figueiredo. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll see you guys after my exam. Hopefully it goes well. We'll see. We will see.